Hey there, hi there, hold there everybody. Rob here. Today we're out at the National Air and Space Museum's Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center, which is connected to Dulles International Airport in Chantilly, Virginia. And behind me are some panels that have the names of people that have donated in support of this museum. And one of the people that's listed is my Uncle Joe, and I'll be showing you his panel in just a moment. I was a docent here at the National Air and Space Museum for 10 years, beginning in 2003, and it's always good to be back. This is the panel where my Uncle Joe Cork's name is inscribed in recognition of his donation to the museum. You might see by the side view that these look like airfoils, the wings of an airplane. So this is foil number 5. It's very close to the front of the museum. And his name is on panel 4, column 3. So if you look down in column 3, I'm going to go as slow as I can here. And there's his name, M. Joseph Cork. The M is for Max. That was his father's name, my grandfather, Max Cork. And Uncle Joe was an aeronautical engineer that spent a large number of years at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory out in California. When you enter the museum, if you take a left, you will pass the Shake Shack restaurant here. And then this is a nice overlook of the gallery with some of the oldest aircraft in the museum, including this very interesting one. This is the Langley Aerodrome, built by Samuel Langley, 3rd Secretary of the Smithsonian. And for a number of years, the Smithsonian claimed that it was the first aircraft capable of manned flight. The Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk in 1903, and they proved that man could fly with powered flight. And at a point, the Smithsonian retracted the claim about the Langley Aerodrome. This airplane actually never flew successfully. This is a classic Piper J-3 Cub, and it holds the distinction of being the very first airplane that was brought into the Udvar-Hazy Center in early 2003. Below the Piper Cub is this large Boeing jet. This is the prototype of the 707, and I was here the day that it landed for a donation to the museum, trailing a bit of black smoke from the burning oil as it landed. And this was not used for passengers, this specific one. This was only used for testing. And then all the other 707s were later developed from it. Behind both the 707 and the Piper Cub, you can see the Concorde. This is the Grumman Gulfhawk. Very well-known aerobatic aircraft from the 30s and 40s that Al Williams flew in air shows around the country as head of Gulf Oil Company's aviation department. In 1937, Al Williams and the Gulf Oil Company worked with the Comet Model Airplane Company to build a very successful and popular model of this aircraft, composed of mainly balsa wood, but a number of other parts, including an aluminum cowling in the front. The first production run of this model came out at Christmas time in 1937, And my grandfather, Max Cork, built the model and proudly displayed it in this photo taken in 1938 in Kokomo, Indiana, when he was very nicely dressed to work at a tire store. More information about that model in a future video. Continuing on this walkway, you'll come to the newest part of the building, the Mary Engen Restoration Hangar, and a nice overlook of the McDonnell Space Hangar. It's always interesting to stop by the restoration hangar to see what work they have going on. If you're here during the week, there are actually going to be people in here working on restoring and preserving these aircraft, getting them cleaned up and ready for display. Some of these were on display at the museum's National Mall facility, and they're getting them ready for redisplay or other purposes. A lot of this work was originally done in Greenbelt, Maryland, and then later on they built this addition to the museum and moved it here. This is the far side of the restoration hangar. Just across from it is a really nice view into the space hangar and the largest occupant, the Space Shuttle Discovery. Some really nice views from up here on this walkway. In addition to the space shuttle, there are a number of spacecraft hanging from the ceiling and a number on display in the rear. This building originally housed the Space Shuttle Enterprise, and when the Space Shuttle program ended, they took the Enterprise out. Behind this flag is a part of the wall above the door that was removed so the tail could fit through. When Enterprise was pulled out, it was put onto a 747 and taken up to the Intrepid Air and Space Museum in New York City, and then they brought Discovery in. Discovery was the third space shuttle to fly into space, preceded by Columbia and Challenger, and then followed by Atlantis and Endeavour. The engines on the back of Discovery are replicas. The actual engines were removed for use in another spaceflight program. This is a view of the Discovery at launch with the solid rocket boosters and external fuel tank. The solid rocket boosters were reused. The fuel tank was never reused. It burned up on the entry following launch. At this time, the California Science Center, home to the Space Shuttle Endeavour, is preparing their display of the only stacked space shuttle with the boosters and the fuel tank that will be on display. It's opening in the future.
That stays open like that, and then it closes afterwards. So there, and then the front. And there has to be something before you can see it.
The space shuttle's three main engines burned for the first 9 minutes of flight. Above the three main engines are the two orbital maneuvering system engines, and those fired to both circularize the orbit following launch and then to deorbit the space shuttle prior to re-entry and landing. To either side of those engines are some thrusters. Next to the Discovery, you can get a look at some of the earlier spacecraft from the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs, including this modified Airstream trailer called the Mobile Quarantine Facility. And this is where the Apollo astronauts were quarantined in the early days following their mission to the moon in 1969. Also in this area, a couple of my other favorite cases. Straight ahead is the model of the mothership from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Some interesting pop culture artifacts. This is one of my favorite cases in the space hangar with the R2-D2 mailbox and the Mercury spacecraft telephone booth. This is the Space Shuttle's waste management system, or toilet. This is the suit that Jim Irwin wore on the moon during the Apollo 15 mission in 1971. This is the Bell X-1 named Glamorous Glennis that test pilot Chuck Yeager used to break the speed of sound in 1947. For many years, this was hanging in the ceiling of the National Air and Space Museum down in DC. This is the first time I've seen it up close. These are some artifacts that belong to Charles Lindbergh, mostly from flights that he took on a Lockheed Sirius float plane with his wife Ann Morrow in the 1930s. If you go under and past the Concorde, you'll come to this nice display at the back door with many different helicopters. When I was in the 3rd grade at Bell School in Rockford, Illinois, a NASA spokesperson visited our school, and I remember sitting on the floor of the gym hearing a presentation about air and space. One of the things that was included was a model of this XV-15 tilt rotor aircraft. So it would take off like a helicopter, the rotors would tilt, and then it would fly forward like an airplane. It's the prototype for the current Marine Corps Osprey. From this north end of the building, you can either take the stairs, as I'm doing, or the elevator to go up to an upper walkway, and it affords some really nice views as you head upstairs. This is a nice overview from the upper walkway, showing the airplanes that are on the ground in white and the ones that are hanging from the sky in a darker color. This is another nice view from the upper walkway, looking down on the SR-71 Blackbird and much of the collection of the jet-powered aircraft at the south end of the building. And then finally, looking back down on the SR-71 toward the entrance, this is a ramp that you can take all the way down back to the main level. And behind us is a really nice view into the space hangar. The lower level of the museum, near the entrance to the IMAX theater, is a nice sampling of the work of World War II aviation artist Robert Taylor. Taylor was born in England in 1946, and they have some really nice examples of his work here. Another feature of the Udvar-Hazy Center is this observation tower, which affords nice views of aircraft taking off and landing from Dulles International Airport. It's reached by an elevator on the lower level near the entrance to the IMAX theater. We'll end our visit at the Udvar-Hazy Center for today with this beautiful Robert McCall mural. It's a reproduction of the original on display in California, celebrating 100 years of powered flight.